This presentation is a sneak peek at the full process we use at UC Irvine to create and communicate a costume design. You will create theoretical or paper projects in design classes, and you will create fully produced designs for the performance in the drama department season. We will use a lot of terminology and refer to things that you may not have heard of, or you may use a different term to describe them. The goal of this presentation is to begin the conversation about what we do and why we do it when we design costumes. There are 10 overarching steps to creating a costume design and communicating it to others: script analysis, visual and written research, mood board or collaging or research presentation, character tear sheets, thumbnails or rough sketches, refined or finished sketches, color and fabric inspiration, a color plot, color or final renderings, and flats and schematics. An effective design process must include others at nearly every step as we go. This is what separates us from traditional fine artists who work on a piece until they alone are satisfied with it. We have to be transparent about what we do, showing ideas to directors and fellow designers and other collaborators while we're still working on our ideas. This transparency can create feelings of vulnerability and performance stress. We worry that others will think we don't know what we're doing when we're still figuring it out. Those are normal feelings, and an incredibly important part of your graduate education will be figuring out how you would like to accomplish these steps. Before we get into a big, scary presentation about all the design steps you'll be expected to do, let's take a moment to acknowledge that starting graduate school has some odd expectations built into it. We will throw you right into design exercises in class and in designing productions, where it seems like everyone knows what they're doing but you. You might be asking, if I knew how to do all this stuff, I wouldn't need graduate school. Yes, that is correct. If you could do all this, we would not expect you to be studying with us. However, the best way to practice design is to do it over and over. In class, you will do smaller parts of the design process. For productions, you will march through the entire design process. That is why we consider designing a production here at UCI a class, because you are learning. We look at your work through a very large lens while you're here, not just one class or just one show. Starting graduate school combines two of the 5 most stressful things people can do in life: moving to a new place and starting a new job. The other 3 are divorce, a death in the family, or a major illness or injury. That is some big, nasty stuff to navigate. So give yourself a break, especially in your first quarter. Especially if you don't know what something is, ask your faculty mentor or a fellow student for help. After 30 years of professional designing, I still don't do everything the way it should be done every time. As a matter of fact, that is why I've stayed with it for so long. I can experiment, and I never stop learning. Each show is different, and it comes at different times in your life or in your calendar that may or may not be convenient. Each calls for a different approach. Each has its victories and its failures. I count myself successful when the vast majority of what I planned comes to fruition the way I thought it would, or even better than I thought, thanks to collaborating with others. Part of what we want you to learn in your time here is how to arrange all the necessary steps in the design process so they work for you. You may find creative inspiration by doing the design steps in a different order than our system. That's okay. As long as you make your deadlines and you're developing a creative process, you will be chalking up those wins. Okay, back to the 10 design steps. The first and foremost step is understanding the script. The script is the blueprint for the entire project, and it keeps all the collaborators working toward the same goal. Every decision you make as a designer must relate to two things, and only two things: the original text and how it translates to your production. In an ideal situation, you will read each script 3 or 4 times. Not all the readings will be deep dives. The first reading, for instance, is the closest you will come to how the audience will experience the story. You will never have another opportunity to hear this story for the first time. Notice where you speed up your reading to find out what happens. Are there places where your attention wandered? Were you shocked, sad, afraid? Make a quick mark in the script at these spots, but don't break your rhythm. Keep going. The second reading is necessary for complicated plays or scripts with complex language. One example might be Shakespeare's history plays, such as Henry IV. It can be very difficult to figure out who did what to whom, and who the heck are all these dukes and armies anyway. If a play is fairly straightforward, it's entirely possible to combine the second and third reading. It might take a lot of flipping back and forth to nail down this plot and some of your other thoughts. Use the 5 W's from journalism as a beginning guide. Who is everyone? What did they do, or what did they bring to the plot? When does the action take place? Be specific. Where does the action take place, and why? Why do things happen as they do, and why are we doing this show? Those 5 W's are an excellent foundation for the third reading, the thoughtful exploration of the script as literature. Are there any patterns established? Actions repeated? Are there important symbols, metaphors, or motifs in the play? Items or phrases that are repeated for emphasis. For instance, in the play The Iceman Cometh, denizens of a dive bar use the phrase pipe dreams repeatedly to verbalize their hopes of what they could do if they weren't trapped by fear and addiction. Each is a powerful promise of a different future and important clue to the characters. All of these ideas you're gathering will produce your ideas for themes and approaches for your designs. The fourth time through the script is a technical read. You will stop many times to record information and create your initial paperwork, the scene breakdown, or character lists. These are 2 examples of scene chart breakdowns, sometimes called character breakdowns. It is important to record which character is in every scene, the time and location of every scene, a quick idea of what happened in each scene, and any costume requirements built into the script, such as characters entering from a rainstorm may need rain gear and might even need to be wet. If a character lights a cigarette, do they need a pocket to hold the pack and a lighter? This scene chart will serve as the central repository of information as you go through the design process. Many designers find the research phase is their favorite one. There are so many possibilities and serendipitous accidents that can happen when you are looking for one thing and bump into another thing entirely. Don't confine yourself to visual research only. Read more about the time period, read novels set in the era, or newspaper and magazine articles. Look at advertisements from the time, weather and climate reports, and anything you can think of. Doing this will unlock new areas to research. There are 4 large areas of research when you begin a new project. The first is creative and artistic inspiration. This kind of research does not have to be logical. These images include artists who worked at the time of the story, or contemporary artists whose mood or insights match the intention of the story. For example, this image could be appropriate for a story that generates a sense of empowerment or excitement. The second type of inspiration concerns the world of the story. These ideas will ground your thoughts in a sense of place. Or perhaps there is more than one world. The characters make a journey, or two opposing sides come from different emotional or physical worlds. This includes any important historical information, such as facts about the battles that took place or other key events. Always include whimsy. This is what will set your research and approach apart from everyone else researching the same topic. The internet makes information more available to us, but that also means others doing the same research will stumble across pretty much the same things you will. What makes you different from everyone else? It will be the non-literal connections you make. So include inanimate objects or animals or other images you feel are interesting. This early in the process, you don't have to know why something appeals to you. Just let yourself explore without judgment. The third category of research is cultural information. Every group of people develops a culture, whether it's the broader society they live within or a more specific work culture. What symbols, modes of dress, and manners might identify the status of each character? Rank the characters from the most to the least powerful, or high status to low status. Research also includes personal histories or lived experiences. Talk with people who resemble your characters or who lived through the same events. For instance, talk to someone who was a nurse in the 1950s or 60s, if that's what your show is about. You will discover details that were never documented. You may also wish to talk with the performers in your show. Do they have aspects of their heritage that could lend authenticity to their costume? Stop to think if you will need a cultural expert to help you and the production. If so, contact the dramaturg or director to see how they are handling this. This need not mean paying professional consultants, although your producer may hire them for the production as a whole. Many community members will gladly share their knowledge in exchange for tickets to the show so they can show their friends what they contributed. Many official institutions, such as museums, police departments, hospitals, and military bases, fund a press office that anyone can contact with questions, and they may even recommend local experts. Such institutions often have a directive to serve the community, and this is one way they can do it. We will discuss cultural experts in design classes, so you have an idea where to begin. No doubt you will gather more research than you can keep track of. It's important to create a system that works for you. Important elements to consider when creating a storage system is ease of access and the ability to see all your imagery side by side. That way you can make connections and discoveries between the images. Of course, many designers use Pinterest to store and organize their images. It's easy to fill our Pinterest boards with hundreds of images, and that can be overwhelming. The crucial next step is to see if you can form groupings with the images. Are there images you collected early but no longer make sense? Create an archive to store it out of the way. Voting images out of the image bank is also an important creative step. You are creating parameters that work. This is a private process, and no two people do this the same way. Many designers then create mood boards with the images or findings. On the right is a sample of an inspirational collage. Collaging is a step further than arranging found items like a mood board. The arrangement and items create a statement or story of their own. Collaging is a powerful creative tool that many designers forget about. Then leave yourself incubation time with your research. Review it all, sort it, and then resort it. Some designers use formal means to spark ideas at this stage. such as mind mapping. This slide shows one of my examples of translating the painting of Spanish painter Juan Miró to ideas for garments, colors, and accessories. With all this information in hand, we are finally ready to study the exact garments worn during the era and locale of the story. Don't leap to this step too early. Clothing has significance only within the context it is worn or within the world you are creating. Remember, you may already have color or texture or scale inspirations that you discovered doing your mood boards or during your research. Assign each of these to your characters first. Then fill in with clothing that fits the parameters you are slowly forming. This is a creative process, and you may find yourself refining these tear sheets more than once. There are several kinds of sketches that costume designers use. They don't necessarily use all these techniques on the same show. The first kind is a thumbnail or rough sketch. These are hasty sketches that can capture a silhouette and just a few major ideas. They are specifically useful for projects that require a lot of group scenes, such as Shakespeare or musicals. They are often quite small, hence the name thumbnail. Some designers set a timer when doing these to force themselves to draw quickly so they can't get too precious. Others challenge themselves to draw a set number of ideas, say 3 or 5. These are also excellent to work through ideas for one character. Some directors respond best when given choices to have a conversation. For instance, the image at left shows 3 different ways a swingy skirt could be worn. These ideas will start a productive conversation. Which is best for the character, for the performer, or for the movement in each scene? Thumbnails may contain a dash of color if you choose, and some designers group them by scene so the director can see what every character will look like on stage together. Once the final look is established, the revised sketch fills in character details. If you're working digitally, it's relatively easy to translate your roughs into finished sketches. You can enlarge them and add layers of detail. For those working by hand, this is the opportunity to add character poses and decide what medium you'd like to work in. The next step is to assign colors to your costumes. Don't try to do this as you design each one or as you paint each one. Save yourself a lot of time doing and undoing color changes by creating an overall color scheme for the show first. Refer back to the artistic inspiration research you found. Another source for color imagery is your fellow designers. The scenic designer may have brought some research to a meeting that struck everyone as perfect to coordinate the entire show. Then articulate what colors you see in the image. Many software and apps contain ways to break colors out of a given image. In this particular case, I used a Photoshop filter on the image from the previous slide that migrates colors into smaller areas so I can see what they are. I can then assess what colors blend into each other and which colors I could use as focal points. And on the right is a costume and scenic color scheme that could have been inspired by the inspiration image. Another important consideration is the use of color throughout the entire show. The emotional impact of a story shifts through time, and so you may wish the colors to arc through time. On the left is a color plot I made for a script that contained 6 different unrelated short stories. At the end, we find out what the whole scheme was. This example is from the pre-digital era, so I used paint chips from the hardware store and other found images to create my chart. The image at right is a digital map of a color film plot. I have also just added color dots to my scene chart so I can keep track of the entire plot when I'm designing. This overview gives you a very solid idea of the entire show and how characters may shift or why they stay the same. This way, you're not left guessing at colors when you're coloring your designs, and you have formed a compelling reason to use each color, which makes a more comprehensive design. In the chart at left, you can see that a major character's colors fade until an important turning point, then switches from a cool color range to a warm color range. I have left fabric until very late in this presentation, but I personally go fabric swatching several times very early in the design phase, about the same time I'm working on inspiration images. I respond very well to fabric, texture, and color, especially in the digital age where everything looks flat. I need more tactile inspiration to remind me what a powerful tool texture can be on stage. The next step is to match fabrics to your character garments and color plot. Sometimes I discovered that a color I'm really emphatic about cannot be purchased. This will tell me early I have to allow for a lot of dyeing and fabric painting in the build process. Since I swatch early, I keep large rings of fabric as a swatch world. Any of these fabrics or colors could be appropriate to the world of my story. They will correspond to my color plot. It's important to match the texture of the fabric to the color. Is your costume going to be shiny, sparkly, or rough? This gives me a good idea of all the fabrics that are available around that could work in the show. Then, in the comfort of my own studio, I can shop through my swatches to assign them to each character. This is easier for me than racing all over town several times looking for just the right thing. This also tells me very early if I have holes in my fabric choices and I need to look for something. Then I sort the swatches onto rings labeled with each character. I keep the swatch rings hanging on the wall in the costume shop to use during the entire build period. And you never know when a character is going to be added, so I don't have to go out shopping again just to see what's there. Color renderings communicate the final design to the director, the actors, and the costume shop. They must take into consideration the way fabric will work with gravity and the texture of the fabric and what that brings to the final look. Color renderings take every form it is possible to imagine, from the most polished to an informal sketch. As long as your collaborators can visual the final effect for that character and that scene, it will be a successful sketch. Here are some examples by different designers, each with their own flair. Some sketches are intended to communicate an artistic feel more than the tiny details like buttons and trim. If your sketches tend to be vague or artistically oriented, it is a good idea to keep a copy of the refined pencil sketch for the costume shop. They respond much better to drawn detail for clues to building the garment. We add an extra step to our design process, creating design flats, also called technical sketches or schematics. You may be required to do this in some professional circumstances, particularly if you work for theme parks or other producers who have garments sewn overseas. You will do this only for the items that will be built in our costume shop. This step is the same as the one where scenic designers draft their ground plan to accompany their visual rendering. To do this step, you must discipline yourself to understand how the garment should look when it is sewn. Where are the seams? Where are the closures? And what are they? Are there details like pockets, belts, cuffs? Special top stitching? It is very easy to get swept away in making the color renderings and then forget to design the actual garment. Of course, we don't think you know how every garment in the world is sewn together. We don't either. We expect you to use resources that will help you. One good place to start is a pattern book at a sewing store, such as Joann's, or the equivalent available online. The pattern book and the back of the pattern will contain schematics. There are dozens of books available on historical fashions and the patterns used to make them. And the UCI library also subscribes to the Commercial Pattern Archive, which contains images of sewing patterns going back to 1847. One of the best resources for garment construction is studying extant or real garments. We have some in our historical collection to help you, and there are many such studies available on museum websites. And for contemporary garments, you have a lot of resources in Orange County and Los Angeles, from discount stores to ethnic stores to designer ateliers at the South Coast Plaza. Okay, we've done it. We've squashed 3 years of design training into one presentation. We will practice all of these steps together in classes and while working on shows. The costume design faculty is here to mentor you through all of these steps and to help you create a process that will work best for you. Thank you for viewing this presentation, and we look forward to working with you.